mind and heart. Then the brightness wanes and the darkness comes with love. Japanese folk song. Once everyone is comfortably seated, the archetypal dialogue between Vimalakirti and Manjushri begins. Manjushri is the bodhisattva of prajna, which is most often translated as wisdom. But it might be better thought of as a kind of clear, bright insight. Wisdom needs something else to be whole, which is compassion. In some sense, the sutra that Vimalakirti speaks is about making the journey from enlightenment, the Buddha in the garden, to endarkenment, the large-hearted bodhisattva on his sickbed. And discovering that, in order to fully awaken, each needs the other to question, to listen, and to open to the roaring silence of things.
Isn't that a nice definition of prajna? Clarity as opposed to knowing everything. I think some of us who wanted to be enlightened thought that we then could get an A on any exam. Okay, Ed.
Okay. If you're wondering what the bright needs from the dark, remember Shariputra's initial dissatisfaction about the way the world is, his wish that it were different so he could be at ease. Notice throughout the story the precarious hold on their enlightenment that some of the garden dwellers have. They don't want to be perturbed by Vimalakirti's perturbing questions. They self-righteously reject the flowers, that a goddess rains on them a little later in the story. They need a lot of special circumstances to protect their purity, and they're anxious about being defiled. Consider how many exhortations we receive daily about everything we really should be doing, about getting and staying fit, happy, successful, productive, youthful, serene, efficient, attractive, well organized, which is our secular version of the same thing. Vimalakirti, in contrast, isn't afraid to go anywhere or to engage with anyone, and that large-hearted courage is one of the great gifts of endarkenment to awakening. Nice.
If Vimalakirti embodies endarkenment, it makes a perfect kind of sense that he would be sick, because that's what endarkenment does. It takes us into the shared common experiences of the sentient world, whereby their nature things get complicated. And where they get complicated is also where they get deep and wide and connected and enlarging and full of unexpected grace, if we let them.
In modern terms, we might also think of the dialogue between Manjushri and Vimalakirti as the crucial meeting between conscious and unconscious, or waking and dreaming life. Perhaps we could say that Manjushri is the flesh of the insight that moves at the lightning speed of synaptic firings in the brain. He has a swift sword that cuts through complication and confusion. Vimalakirti, on the other hand, represents the slower movements of the heart, the idiosyncratic inhale and exhale beat of a bloody muscle. He has a remarkable sickbed upon which he lies down to rest on the vastness.
Milan? I think you're muted. Thank you.
Thank you. We know what it's like when mind and heart are laboring separately from each other. The heaviness of a human heart, unlightened by insight, is often what brings people to meditation. Then, when we begin to have certain kind of meditation experiences, insight will do what it does, which is run out ahead. That's painful in its own way because you can see everything so clearly, but you can't, for the time being, feel warmth or tenderness. You have to suffer the discomfort while your heart catches up. If you don't, you become one of those companions on the way who makes people wonder how someone who's done so much meditating can be such a jerk, except the word is usually something strong.
That's funny.
So, in each of us, Manjushri and Vimalakirti have this grand conversation, looking for a way to move in some kind of sync, even if it's at a different speeds, even if it is at different speeds. Manjushri's mind is always making discernments about things, and Vimalakirti's heart is embracing them. Oh, that is something. Manjushri's mind is always making discernments about things, and Vimalakirti's heart is embracing them. We want Manjushri's bright clarity, and we want the soulful depths that endarkening brings us.
Bodhisattva sickness. I am sick because the whole world is sick. Vimalakirti. In their dialogue, Manjushri and Vimalakirti indirectly respond to Shariputra's lament that the world doesn't feel like a paradise to him. Manjushri asks a series of questions that seem to come out of a desire to fix Vimalakirti's illness. Again, by illness, the sutra means any kind of dis-ease, be it physical, emotional, mental, social, cultural, or spiritual. Whatever in this tilted world feels tilted in a way that causes us suffering. But for Vimalakirti, dealing with dis-ease isn't simply a matter of eliminating a problem. He's interested in how we can be free in whatever circumstances we find ourselves, wherever we are along the spectrum of sick to well. In his answers to Manjushri's questions, he lays out a process of healing the human heart that takes time, attention, and care.
Could you read that again, please?
Sure.
Well, let's the next person read it, okay? So we get it in two voices. Is that all right?
Thank you.
Where would you like me to start rereading?
In their dialogue.
Okay. In their dialogue, Manjushri and Vimalakirti indirectly respond to Shariputra's lament that the world doesn't feel like a paradise to him. Manjushri asks a series of questions that seem to come out of a desire to fix Vimalakirti's illness. Again, by illness, the sutra means any kind of dis-ease, be it physical, emotional, mental, social, cultural, or spiritual. Whatever in this tilted world feels tilted in a way that causes us suffering. But for Vimalakirti, dealing with dis-ease isn't simply a matter of eliminating a problem. He's interested in how we can be free in whatever circumstances we find ourselves, wherever we are along the spectrum of sick to well. In his answers to Manjushri's questions, he lays out a process of healing the human heart that takes time, attention, and care. Without waiting for answers, Manjushri asked Vimalakirti, "Can you bear it?" Then he asked, "Could the treatment be making you worse?" Anyone who's taken up a spiritual path will wonder at some point whether the treatment is worse than the disease. Then, how did you get this? Next, how long have you had it? And finally, how can it be extinguished?
Manjushri is the patron saint of experiences that are instant and thoroughgoing, in which everything changes from one moment to the next. And it's clear that we're never going to revert to the previous status quo. In his last question, he is asking how Vimalakirti's illness can be made to disappear in that way, which isn't necessarily the same thing as how it might be healed. Think of the contemporary good death movement, which obviously isn't about not dying, but about dying in a good way. For most of us, awakening is made of a mixture of Manjushri's quantum shifts and Vimalakirti's process of transforming dis-ease into some kind of ease in the midst of uneasy states.
If Manjushri's inquiries are quite familiar to anyone who's been sick, Vimalakirti's responses aren't the ordinary ones. Oh, I caught the bug that's going around and I'm drinking lots of fluid. They aren't even they aren't even philosophically orthodox. I am reaping the effects of long-standing karmic conditions having to do with actions in previous lives. Instead, he responds with these famous words: I am sick because the whole world is sick. If everyone's illness were healed, mine would be too. Why? Because bodhisattvas come to this world of birth and death for the sake of all beings, and part of being in this world of birth and death is getting sick. When everyone is liberated from illness, I will be too.
I am sick because the whole world is sick. This is the purest formulation of Vimalakirti's absolute, unquestioned, unmitigated, unbuffered, uncompromised alle- al- allegiance to the world.
Allegiance.
Allegiance. Thank you. I am the world and the world is me. We have one condition. Is that the same one?
Yeah, I think it's the same paragraph if you want to continue.
When the world's heart is breaking, my heart breaks. When morning star rises, I rise with it. I am the sorrow of the world and its joy, and we share the same fate. To love is to love the world, and to hate is to hate the world. The world's healing is my healing, in which I have an infinitesimal and essential part. It is that simple, that naked and open, the settle in the deepest places, the underground delta where the river of my heart mind meets the sea of the world. Is my condition, out of which everything else flows. When I can touch this without twitching, abide here without fleeing, what naturally flows into me from the sea of the world is bodhisattva,
No, bodhicitta.
bodhicitta, the intention toward awakening, because my awakening is the world's awakening. I am waking because the whole world is waking.
What flows into us in the world's yearning, which we experience as our own, the aspiration we feel isn't toward something outside itself. The aspiration, the yearning, is it. When we can touch this without twitching, abide here without fleeing, a bodhisattva begins to be born. Bodhisattvas give birth to themselves, something that happens every time a person, like one of us, does a couple of things. First, you find arising in your heart the intention to awaken so that you can discover what you uniquely do that's helpful in the world. That's bodhicitta. And then you make the commitment known as the bodhisattva. Vow to put that intention at the center of your life. Yeah, that's what it is.
Bodhisattva is born not by becoming instantly and completely awake and skillful at everything, constantly bestowing wonderful gifts on others, but simply by having the willingness to put this commitment at the center, and then spending the rest of your life figuring out what that means, provisionally, imperfectly, every day. This is how a bodhisattva, a yearning and intention, enters the world of birth and death for the sake of all beings. We begin, and then the birth is midwifed by our family, our loved ones, our coworkers, our companions on the way.
Okay. Oops. Vimalakirti continues. Part of being in this world of birth and death is getting sick. We live in a world of change and impermanence, of coming and going, rising and falling, birth and death. Because we live in that kind of world, we're constantly experiencing cycles that include arcs of growth and also of decay. Illness and the other arcs of unbecoming are just as natural as the arcs of healing and becoming. This is the nature of the lives we lead. Shall I read one more?
Sure.
Vimalakirti finishes by saying, when everyone is liberated from illness, I will be too. I hear in this a fundamental allegiance to life as it is. That's nice. I hear in this a fundamental allegiance to life as it is. I'm like this because the world is like this. You're like this because the world is like this. If the world changed and we were able to release ourselves from illness, none of us would be ill anymore. But as long as we can't, as long as we're still in the process, I'm in too.
Pretending to be sick. See how vast and wide the world is? Why do you get up and get dressed at the sound of the morning bell? Human. The sutra mentions at the beginning that Vimalakirti is only pretending to be sick, using skillful means in order to teach others. The Buddhist concept of skillful means is a tricky one. It's possible to make big consequential mistakes when you believe you know how to bend your message, circumstances, and other people in the service of your idea of helpfulness. And realizing that you're on the other end of someone's attempt at skillful means can sometimes just feel icky. The skillful means interpretation feels a bit pious to me, or like the sutra makers are trying to distance themselves from something they find unsettling in Vimalakirti's message. Anyway, there are less orthodox and perhaps more fruitful ways of looking at this pretending. Do you all know about skillful means? Maybe it's the Diamond Sutra or the Lotus Sutra. I'm not sure, but there's a situation where these kids are playing in a house and the house is on fire, and the father can't get the kids out of the house because they're playing. So he says, if you come out of the house, I'll give you this chariot with all these toys and stuff. So they come out of the house and they're saved. And eventually they even get the chariot, which is strange. But skillful means is doing whatever's necessary for that situation. And upaya in New Mexico, in Santa Fe, means a skillful means. That word. That's the word for skillful
It,
means.
so that even implies, even if you have to trick them through manipulation.
Yes, whatever you
Wow.
need to do, where it's kind of like the end justifies the means. You can rationalize a lot of activity with skillful means.
Whoa. I always thought that then uh, that was not a good thing to do, that you need to have some limits, um, because it can go too far.
Um,
When the end justifies the means, that's what I mean. So it's, but
I don't
okay.
know. I have big arguments with my daughter-in-law because I say it's all right to steal if it's your only option and your kids are starving. And
Well, yeah.
she says absolutely not. In no way would I do that.
Even
Yeah,
the Catholic Church considers that's not a sin. If you're hungry, your kids are
Well,
hungry, robbing in that moment is not considered a sin.
yeah,
No.
so there you go. That's skillful means.
Okay. I I thank you for that. That put things into perspective for me.
It's dangerous territory because it's so easy to rationalize. Oh, I was doing it because so I'm sure there's situations where you could have found other options.
Yeah,
well,
but
isn't that where we end up using discernment to dance on the head of a pin?
Yeah,
to me, the example that you have given makes it very clear, because it's one thing to rob for survival, for taking care of your kids and, and not die out of hunger, than to rob because you want to buy jewelry. It's very different.
or to rob because you were deprived all your life. Some people. I mean, I don't think. In fact, Socrates said it that people don't choose to do anything but good. I mean, to their idea of good.
Mhm.
But
Melissa,
just one, no,
I
go
thought
ahead.
Melissa was going to say something, but she was muted, and I didn't mean to overspeak you, Milan.
You go ahead, Milan.
No, thank you. Just quickly, I was going to say, just like it's important to put in perspective the precepts, the karma, and all this skillful means is on the face of Dharma.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. Yeah.
Good point.
Well,
Hey, who's reading
there's
now?
one thing
Oh, go on.
I'm reading next, but the one thing I was going to say also, the whole stealing to feed the children, that doesn't mean that you can to do that. That doesn't mean that gives you um, authorization to take a gun and shoot people so you can get to the food. Or you can't, it there has to be within, I mean, to me, it has to be within the bounds of what is needed, right? If you need food, then you may indeed end up stealing food, but you don't need to harm anybody in that process, right?
Or the skillful
That's
means of
my
finding
thought.
the food bank.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, or the skillful
Uh,
means of begging. And no matter
Okay,
how you go about it, everything, I think Malin, pointed to that, everything has consequence.
exactly.
So think twice, maybe three
Yeah.
times.
That Vimalakirti might be pretending to be sick, reminiscent of something the Chan teacher Han Bu says. Teaching Chan is like casting fake pearls before people pretending to be beggars. Han Bu knows that he's offering his pearls of wisdom to people already in possession of the greatest jewel, the awakening inherent in each of us. In other words, whatever our circumstances, even if we need or ill, that doesn't make us essentially beggars or sick people. It makes us beings in a world that includes poverty, disease, and many other sorrows. It's a call to see, in addition to wounds and scars, the small glow of awakening in each of our bellies. So there we have the answer.
The invitation is to open some space between the natural condition of being alive in a world of birth and death and an unchanging identification with some aspect of the condition. The nature of being alive in such a world is to be a little tilted because the world is tilted. That's different from saying that your identifies most significantly the particular way you are tilted. I've lived with a very serious chronic health condition, and I can remember early on having to decide whether I was going to go through life as the sick girl, which is how I thought of it. That would have been an identification with my condition, taking one fact of my life, putting it at the center, and hitching everything else up to the tethering post.
Vimalakirti's alternative is to let your vow of awakening settle at the center instead. Over time, the vow spreads out into a kind of field, and everything from the fleeting moments to the long-standing circumstances of your life will arise in that field, and the vow will help hold them. This field tends to have fewer fortifications linked by deep grooves of habit, more spacious views, and a milder climate on most days.
Hanging out in such a field can bring ease, and ease can bring openness. The bodhisattva of compassion is called Gyanan, Gainan in Chinese, which means listens.
Guanyin.
Guanyin, thank you. Guanyin in Chinese, which means listens. This vow we're talking about is her vow. And so it calls us to listen with a simple heart to our kin of all kinds when they speak or cry and whisper about the sorrows of a tilted world. Held together by scars and radiance, all of us, held together by scars and radiance, all of us, often in need, all of us, and sometimes some of us in great need. The filaments that connect us vibrating with prayers and exhortations, the vow at the center, the small glow in our bellies, listening, sending out its own filaments in reply.
It's starting to go a bit dreamlike and mysterious inside this pretending. Yunmen, another Chan teacher, asks a question that takes us further along that path. See how vast and wide the world is. Why do you get up and get dressed at the sound of the morning bell? Why, in the midst of the unfathomable vastness, do you get up every morning when the alarm goes off and start another ordinary day? Why do I come out of the deep space of sleep every morning to put on my human skin and go out to live a human life?
Isn't that a nice question?
It's a great question. And how do you live into the answer to that question?
Say that again.
I said, and how do you live into the answer of that question?
Hmm.
That's my self-imposed koan.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm working on it.
And it's
I
quite a
think,
luxury if you have a choice, isn't it?
Yeah.
Many don't. Oh, my turn. Maybe it's because each of us is the vastness manifesting in a particular way. You're this person, I'm that person. There are the bird persons under the eaves and the ground cover persons just beginning to spread in the courtyard. We put on our clothes when the alarm goes off because for another day, we accept the invitation to be the vastness taking this form, and we try not to be stingy about it. We'll pretend to be human beings in our human being skins, not in a sense of a false performance, but remembering that we're both born and unborn, named and unnamed, human and everything else in the universe. There's a sense of play about this. The performance today is heavily flavored by memories of childhood summers at the beach or comically ramifying lists of tasks, or it is stained and dyed by silence.
Hmm. In a koan from the Book of Security,
No,
the Chan
serenity.
teach
Serenity.
Serenity. Thank you. Yep, you
Okay.
are very correct. The Book
Yeah.
of Serenity makes much more sense. The Chan teacher Dogsan is dying, and a monastic asks him, "You are unwell. Is there someone, after all, who isn't sick? Is there an aspect of you unaffected by illness? Is there some eternal Buddha nature part of you that isn't experiencing the sickness you're experiencing?" Doshan says, "There is." So the monastic asks, "Does the one who isn't sick take care of you?" It's a natural way to think about it. If there's something we believe in, like Buddha nature or God or goddess or whatever we identify as that which is not sick, do we find consolation and comfort there? Are we being taken care of by that not sickness of the universe?
But Dangshan says the opposite. I am actually taking care of that one. By being sick, I am taking care of that one who is not sick. In other words, the life I have been giving is shaped like the right now. Yeah. In other words, the life I have been given is shaped like this right now. Even when it's hard, it's an extraordinary gift. The vastness swirling into form to experience itself like this, like me. And in exchange, I'm living my life as generously as I can.
The monastic asked, "What's it like when you take care of that one?" Dongshan says, "Then I don't see that there is any illness." I might be sick, but I don't have preconceived ideas about what illness is. I'm not going to start from the position that illness is a failure of life to go as it should, or that is some kind of gift. Let me be sick and find out what it means. Once, when a particularly bad patch of illness stretched on for months, I'd wake in the morning and sometimes, just for a moment, I was in the sweet, calm space before the illness constellated around me, and I could remember what not sick was like. Then the symptoms would start blinking, and I'd realize that it was going to be another long, challenging day. I'd stumble out of bed, make tea, and weep. Both things were true: the sweetness of a moment of physical ease and the weeping. Denying neither of them, leaving them both as uncomplicatedly as I was able, was what I could do those days to take care for that one to stay close to the vow.
Could you,
Okay, this really speaks to me.
can you go back up another paragraph, please, Kim? There it is. Okay, yeah, I just needed to read that part again. That I don't see that there is any illness. I might be sick, but I don't have preconceived ideas. I'm not going to start from the position that.
Should we have Cassie just read it again?
If she like, I just saw what
Okay.
I needed to digest. I got it.
Cassie, you want to read it again?
Sure. Dongshan says, then I don't see that there is any illness. I might be sick, but I don't have preconceived ideas about what illness is. I'm not going to start from the position that illness is a failure of life to go as it should, or that it's some kind of gift. Let me be sick and find out what it means. Once, when a particularly bad patch of illness stretched on for months, I'd wake in the morning, and sometimes, just for a moment, I was in the sweet, calm space before the illness constellated around me, and I could remember what sick was like. Then the symptoms would start blinking, and I'd realize that it was going to be another long, challenging day. I'd stumble out of bed, make tea, and weep. Both things were true: the sweetness of the moment of physical ease and the weeping. Denying neither of them, living them both as uncomplicatedly as I was able, was what I could do those days to care for that one, to stay close to the vow. Unbeguiled by the lure of skillful means, I marvel instead as my hand figures out, movement by movement, what it means to be a hand.
Moment by moment.
Thank you. Unbeguiled by the lure of skillful means, I marvel instead as my hand figures out, moment by moment, what it means to be a hand. And my heart learns what a heart is on a sunny morning after days of fog. Am I, pretending? Not exactly, but sort of. If pretending means a series of essays,
I think
and
it's assays, isn't it?
essays and approximations.
They do it when you can assay gold to see if it's really gold.
And approximations. One not knowing flowing into another, with lots of pauses to listen. Outside my window are subatomic particles pretending to be trees. The world is only a dream, but it is, in part, how do we tend to the dream?
Small compassion. I saw you fall, so I'm helping. Pang Ling Zhao. Let's pause for a moment to consider that if ever a word were in need of emergency resuscitation.
Wait, here's the footnote on that. It's a beautiful story.
What did I miss?
No, for Pang Lin Zhao's thing.
Oh, okay.
This
Yeah.
comes from a koan about a young woman who, when she sees her father trip and fall, throws herself down next to him.
Big
Yeah,
favorite of mine.
That's a whole story, yeah.
Yeah.
For
Okay.
those who don't know the story, what is the story?
Oh. Um. So, Trudy just talked about this in um I talked this last week. I have the email right here. Let me see if I can actually say it. Okay. Do y'all want to hear the part
Yeah.
from Trudy? Okay.
Yeah.
Please.
Okay. Ling Zhao's helping. Layman Peng and his daughter Ling Zhao were traveling along the road selling bamboo baskets. Coming down off a bridge, the layman stumbled and fell. Ling Zhao immediately ran to her father, throwing herself on the ground beside him. "What in the world are you doing?" cried the layman. "I'm helping," replied Ling Zhao. "Luckily, no one is looking," the layman replied with a laugh. And then this koan is explored in the Hidden Lamp. In the story, the concepts of non-duality and immediate compassion. Instead of simply helping him, Ling Zhao drops to the ground to join him in his fall, demonstrating a direct, unmeditated engagement with the present moment and her father's experience. The exchange highlights a playful, non-conceptual understanding of reality, where the distinction between the helper and the one being helped is erased.
Well, we often talk about the only thing you can do when someone's really distressed is to sit next to them or to hold them.
Yeah, it's compassion on steroids without any,
As opposed to picking them up.
It's to be in the depth with them.
They were very close, the daughter and the father.
Yeah.
I'll put it in chat here.
Thank you.
And I think it also brings up that reality of unmitigated compassion or unspecified, not judged in either way, because you don't really always know what's going on for another person. Did they slip in the mud? Did they sit down in the mud? So, like Kim said, sometimes the best thing you can do is just sit and be there and not try and define or guess or force anything else out.
But it seems like the father was kind of like, if you would have just offered me your hand to get up, that would have been sufficient. But
They were both really practiced Buddhists, and I think he got it.
Oh, he did. I think he got it too.
Yeah,
Because he
yeah.
kind of laughed and said, thanks. He enjoyed the fact that she did that action versus anything else. It is there's an appreciation in the story when you read it.
And it sort of
So,
takes away self-judgment. It's just, being playfully connected. Yeah.
Yeah.
so let's pause for a moment to consider that if ever a word were in need of emergency resuscitation, it's compassion. It's gotten so tangled up in our ideas about what we think we ought to be feeling and doing, and how we imagine we fall short, that we'd be forgiven for taking against it. We'd be forgiven for taking against it. And to the extent we feel averse toward it, we stop engaging with it in a lively way and it goes generic. Just what does compassion mean anymore? Exactly. Well, this sutra has some bracingly uncommon ideas about that. So perhaps it's just the tonic of our semi comatose word. So perhaps it's just the tonic our semi comatose word needs. What a fun way to look at that.
Hmm.
When Manjushri asks about his illness, Vimalakirti replies, "My illness comes from great compassion." When something is called great in Chinese philosophical tradition, it's more than an adjective of praise or ranking. Things are simultaneously seen from both great and small perspectives, which are equally important. I wonder if that's like the relative and the absolute, or the small mind, big mind, that's what great is. I haven't.
Hmm.
Vimalakirti is engaged in small compassion all the time. If we think of small compassion as the detail, the particular, the local, it's the ways we live and interact in this fragile zone of earth and sky that includes this rocky planet, the thin layer of organic matter under our feet, and the surrounding air. We, in our human flesh, attempt to deal in deceit. Oh,
Descent.
I'm sorry, in decent and helpful ways with the flesh of others, other humans, other animals, the flesh of plants, even the flesh of nuclear reactors. We're using our embodiment, our materiality, to affect the embodiment and materiality of others, flesh on flesh. That's a small view of compassion, and it's no small thing.
Hmm. Vimalakirti walks the back streets and dark alleys of the city outside of which the Buddha is encamped. He's going places where many of the Buddha's disciples wouldn't because they're afraid, as much for their spiritual as their physical safety. They think that to walk those streets, to see what you would see and engage with what you would engage with in those places, represents a threat to their deepest spiritual desire to be released from this life between earth and sky, which to them seems like the realm of great suffering. Vimalakirti isn't afraid in that way. In fact, quite the opposite. His particular expression of bodhisattva is willing to go anywhere and to extend a hand wherever it's possible to do so. And not only is he doing that, but it isn't bothering him. He's sick, but he isn't suffering. And it's an important distinction.
When I amplify the story of Vimalakirti, I wonder what happened on his way through those difficult places. Did he catch tuberculosis? Was he beaten up? What might have been the proximate cause of his illness? Whatever happened, it doesn't translate into suffering because he's doing what he believes is the essential thing to do. The essential thing isn't to go out and deliberately throw himself in the path of getting sick or injured, but to accept that to be alive is to get dinged up. How many of us will make it through life without scars and antibodies, painful memories and regrets? The root of small compassion is to understand that there is no escaping such things, only a question of how we acquire them, in service to what.
Vimalakirti's illness, like all other things, if we let them, put us in touch with how most people live. Above my desk is something Eleanor Roosevelt said. Most of the work in the world is done by people who weren't feeling very well that day. Vimalakirti's courage and ours bring us into situations where we might be helpful. It seems obvious to say it, but we are most helpful where people and animals and plants and nuclear reactors are in trouble. How is he able to engage in these small, radiant acts of compassion and even get sick from doing so, but not suffer? How does he keep from crossing that gap? That's so easy to cross. What's the view that helps us to act of risky generosity that don't have suffering as their inevitable result? This is where we get into the realm of great compassion, which isn't a different form of compassion, but a different way of looking at it.
Let us, sometimes frightened disciples, pause again for a small moment of small compassion amongst ourselves. Vimalakirti is an astonishing figure, a mythic one. That means he is larger than life and more of just about everything, most likely, than we could imagine for ourselves. So, what do we do with that? Do we reject it as so idealized as to be meaningless or oppressive as we might with compassion? Do we reject it as so idealized as to be meaningless or oppressive as we might with compassion? Or can we think of him as an ally, a protector, a reminder of the potential each of us is gestating? Can we imagine him not as some carnival figure to measure ourselves against, but as the force of the world turning its mercy towards us? Vimalakirti is the kind words that saved your life once, the sunrise that started your heart healing, the pain that stopped you in your tracks when you needed to stop. Can we see him shining in the reflected light of all our aspirations toward awakening? When I do that, a huge tenderness rises in me for your aspirations, for my aspirations, for the world's bottomless longing to awaken. A lot of this I'd like to hear again. I mean, it's so deep. To read it so fast seems like I need more time for it to get through all my blocks.
Here, here.
All right, shall I read it again then?
Do you want to read this? Yeah.
Yeah, because this is probably a good stopping point after this. Let us, sometimes frightened disciples, pause again for a small moment of small compassion amongst ourselves. Vimalakirti is an astonishing figure, a mythic one. That means he's larger than life and more of just about everything, most likely than we could imagine for ourselves. So what do we do with that? Do we reject it as so idealized as to be meaningless or oppressive as we might with compassion? That's a serious sentence. Do we reject it as so idealized as to be meaningless or oppressive as we might with compassion? Or can we think of him as an ally, a protector, a reminder of the potential each of us is gestating? Can we imagine him not as some carnival figure to measure ourselves against, but as the force of the world turning its mercy toward us. Vimalakirti is the kind words that saved your life once, the sunrise that started your heart healing, the pain that stopped you in your tracks when you needed to stop. Can we see him shining with the reflected light of all our aspirations toward awakening? When I do that, a huge tenderness rises in me. For your aspirations, for my aspirations, for the world's bottomless longing to awaken.
Hmm.
Yep, that's a mouthful.
Page 40.
Hmm.
Okay, should we do our thing? So we start out by sitting for a minute. We forgot to do that last time. I forgot to do that. I will own it. Do we have a volunteer to start? Melissa. Well, you're the only one unmuted besides me.
Ah, okay. Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? I'm just fascinated by this whole process and how we're looking at Vimalakirti in such a kind of a different way. You know, we kind of saw him, I think, coming into this as sort of arrogant and his way was the way and he was going to tell everybody how that was supposed to be. And here and now we're kind of seeing him as being open and listening, right? And not necessarily telling everything every way it should be, but more listening and being there to kind of guide. Um, and I like that a lot. And I don't know, I'm gonna have to think a lot about what was said today. But I really think it's fascinating, and if one can really look at one's life in that manner, then I think one can be a compassionate person without losing one's own compassion for oneself. And I know sometimes, at least for me, that's difficult. I can be very compassionate for other people, but it takes away the compassion I have for myself. Um, so yeah, I thought it was super interesting and insightful. And thank you all for being willing to reread portions. That's very, for me, it's very helpful. And for thinking one portions need to be reread, that's it's always really good too. Mm, yeah.
Do you want to choose someone?
Um, Kathy.
Did you say Ed or yes?
I said Kathy.
Oh, perfect.
Thank you. I went
Thank you.
back to the where there's so many incredibly deep things in this section that I needed it all to be slower. I needed it all to be twice or three times or 10 times. I felt like that I meant to be, I felt like that it was, I felt like I had so many stuck places within it that it was opening up many different things. And one of the stuck places came at the very, very beginning. And I brought the book back up to reread it. If you're wondering what the bright needs from the dark, and I was like, oh, that's such the opposite way of thinking. Um, and that remember Shariputra's initial dissatisfaction about the way the world is. His wish that it were different so he could be at ease. And that just really landed in me. You know, I want to only experience light because so I could be at ease, not that so growth could happen, so that connection can happen, so that I would jump into the mud in order to have a moment of togetherness instead of a moment of roles of hierarchy. That it was, you know, that the true essence is being with and not wanting to manipulate experience like at all, I guess. And I want the best for all of us, for all the humans, for all the animals and all the plants. You know, I don't, it's not like I don't have hope for those things, but being with you is really it. So thank you.
You want to call someone?
Starlet.
Um, there's a lot in what we have read. And I hope I can remember the many things I want to talk about this. It really landed on me when he says that I am sick because the world is sick. To me, that was actually the um, Esau's helping layman Pang. Basically, Vimalakirti saw the earth, the world was fallen, and his reaction to help was to lay by the side of the world, which is something that extrapolating. Sometimes when somebody's sick, you can give them an aspirin, make them chicken soup, or, you know, but many times there's nothing you can do. And all you can do is when it's missing the most, and is to have company. Many people, when they get really, really sick, the biggest thing is isolation. So that's a huge thing to have somebody that will come and just be with you. Not trying to heal you, not trying to, just be with you. Also, I see it as Vimalakirti being sick because the world is sick. I also see it as a representation of being one. Because if one is equal to everything, Vimalakirti was being one with the world. And the other thing that I also really liked, I really, really liked this one, is that you can be sick, but it doesn't mean that you're suffering. I know that Earth gets a bad rap because you can get sick, you are mortal, etc., etc. But being sick doesn't mean to be miserable.
Yeah, wasn't that in the last line? It was right at the end, wasn't it?
Yes. And it's just that thought of, well, you're sick, you're not supposed to be enjoying life. Well, yes.
Well, it's been a big discovery for you, hasn't it?
I wrote a poem about it, remember? And you used it
Yeah.
for a Dharma talk. And it is. It is. It makes you more in touch with life and its beauty and how worth it is to be here enjoying life and not suffering it.
Ed, I think you're next.
All right, clock. Like everybody else, this was a cornucopia of stuff to sit with. I mean, talk about overflowing. Um, there was a couple of things. I'm trying to read my notes here because he was talking about the heaviness of a human heart, unlightened by insight, and how that brings people to meditation. Um, and then the whole thing about dis-ease, not necessarily disease, not necessarily sickness. That is huge. I mean, the past 2 years, I've had my share of real sickness, but I've also had a whole bunch of stuff that was uneasy, that was dis-ease, and being able to have a place, a perch to live within that, and to go through the enlightenment and the endarkenment roller coaster that puts you on. And there's no way out of that, that I found. I think he said you have to suffer the discomfort. You have to suffer discomfort while your heart catches up. If you don't, you become one of those companions on the way who makes people wonder how someone who's done so much meditating can be such a jerk.
Yeah.
That cracked me up. but we have met those people too. And what sticks with me throughout all of this, I think, is that there are those moments when it all lines up, and the discernment, the perspective on it makes sense. It fits perfectly, and it moves you from one moment to the next throughout the day. And then there's those other days where you feel like somebody put you in a martini and they did shaken and stirred. They just swizzled you up. But still, there's always something there, and what we put our attention to as to what's real, what's illusions. I like the thing that he said about trees pretending at a subatomic level. That tickled the daylights out of me. I thought that's beautiful. Um, and I'd like to see trees at a subatomic level as I walk by. But again, this is a whole bunch of stuff for how to live life well, regardless of circumstance, on a daily, moment by moment basis. Who didn't do anything? Milan.
Thank you, Ed. Yeah, I think this chapter was very expansive to me. The repetition at the beginning that we are a mirror of the world, and how it was put that in a way everything is ill, not just human beings, but the culture and all these configurations that we have made, but at the same time, how to get in sync of heart and mind, to put the most important vow, as it was said, that is the willingness of awakening. I found that very powerful. And also this idea that was repeated at the beginning several times, that we live in a world of birth and death. I think to me that was very important because sometimes I am very confused in this world, and having that in mind, that we live in that sort of world, is, I think, is good for me to remember. And I really also liked this idea how to go out of the deep space of sleep that relates also with the vow of awakening. And this life that we live day by day is actually, at least mine, is a deep space of sleep. I think there's a lot in there, not just the awakening part, but what does that mean to sleep, sorry. And also I did appreciate it at the end that Vimalakirti is itself, himself, the kind words that saved you, and some other examples. It's like this synonymous was very refreshing also for me.
So one of the things I'm sure you photographers have discovered is that that shadows are just as important a part of the picture as the object. Where we tend normally to discount shadows. But so I made a proposal today. I have a habit of making proposals of things that bug people. So, well, I was asked to put up a card on our altar for Goody, the one who was, and then I said, well, how about those that were killed in Austin in the shooting? And everyone agreed that's all right. And initially in the day, there was only one person had been identified, and then a little later they identified the second person. And then I started thinking about the shooter, and I suggested we should put the shooter up. And one person responded, and as we've been reading tonight, I keep thinking, getting more and more compassion for this shooter. And then earlier I saw his picture, and I thought, oh my God, what have we done to this person to have him do what he did? One teacher responded. So I proposed this to the teachers after our meeting. I didn't think of it during our meeting, but and one teacher said, "Oh no, we can't do that. It would be too difficult for the Sangha." And I'm just curious, maybe when I'm through talking, if you could give me some feedback about whether that would be difficult. But there's a wonderful story, and I might have told it to some of you, where the Buddha's on the boat with a pirate and a bunch of people, and he reads I've told some of you, he reads the pirate's mind. He has that skill, and he sees the pirate's going to kill people, so he kills the pirate, but not to protect the people on the boat, but to protect the pirate from bad karma. He said the pirate is the only one in trouble. And in the same way, I feel that this shooter is the one we really need to have compassion for. So I'm curious. We have a few minutes about your response, Ed.
That is so perfect that you said that. And kudos to you for doing that, because I had that same.
I haven't done it yet.
Well, hey, you need to get on it. Because that was one of the first thoughts, especially when I saw the guy and had that physical look. I thought, oh my God, what they're going to do. They're going to vilify this guy. They're going to make anybody who prays to Allah be a devil or a demon. And something happened to him to get him to that point, to take that action. And it's traumatic, it's horrible, but we don't really tend to want to address that. And we need
something happened over and over and over and over.
Yes. And we need to have understanding, and we need to have compassion for that. And Thich Nhat Hanh has that story about the people on the boat.
Yeah,
the pirate who rapes the young girl, and she throws herself overboard, and they're all ready to condemn the pirate. And Han says, hey, if you'd lived that life that pirate lived, and all he knew was to kill, murder, and rape, you would have done the same thing. He's only doing what he knows to do because that's the circumstance that he was brought up in. And that's why, to heal, you need to have a completion of activity and awareness of everything and everybody engaged in it. Like how you're going to heal racism. I can't sit down and say everybody who's a white person, they have to get their shit together and then there'll be no racism, because there are black people that are in there and they have trauma or they have hate and so forth and so on. Everybody that's in that field of play needs to have some awareness and some help and some understanding. But good for you. You need to close this Zoom down and type that letter and send it to the teachers. And I didn't say a word in case they backfire.
And Tim, what did President Kennedy say? We do this not because it's easy, but because it's hard. Hard should never be an excuse for not doing something. Hard should be the reason that we go out and try to figure it out and do something. I think you absolutely should do that.
I'll tell you what AI said after we get to more of it is one of the first times I'm not exactly in agreement, but
What we're really talking about also is acceptance.
Mm.
And that's that's a practice edge. And challenging somebody on their ideas of acceptance is usually fraught. These I've been so incredibly moved by these walking monks and how they fully accepted the guy in the truck who pushes on his gas so that they have to walk in the exhaust, and the guy who got run over by another car and lost his leg and continued the walk without holding resentment. And I'm nowhere near that, but it's an awareness that I think is important.
And doesn't that fit us most appropriately into the essence, the purity of our Bodhisattva vow?
I think so.
Okay.
And I don't know much about the news report. I mean, I've seen blips and things, but one of the things I thought I saw was that the shooter had mental incapacities, that he didn't have full processing thing.
No, I didn't read anything about that.
I haven't seen it yet either.
Yeah. I just get Instagram blips.
And it would be another discussion we could have about,
Right.
to what extent is that a factor.
Right.
I had a student who shot his teacher and killed him. And it's kind of a long story and we only have a minute, but the situation was this teacher was preventing him from graduating. But also he had an incomplete with me because he printed up some negatives he found in the garbage can. And I said, no, you need to do your own pictures. You can't do someone else's. And we had an appointment. He was going to come to my house to bring his pictures, but then he canceled. Anyway, I told my mother about this, that he killed his teacher. And my mom said, oh, was he a violent person? She was a psychiatric social worker. And it's just such an interesting response that she had.
And there's that story of the 6-year-old boy who took a gun to school and shot his first grade teacher.
So anyway, I don't know. Yes, you want to say something, Starlet? Quick, because our time's up.
I just want to say that if you do this, it's a way of looking at life as is. It's not only the consequence, but what caused it. And you're putting both of them there. So there can be a full picture of what happened. And I think it would be good to find out the background of his life, but without vilifying. And the same way, get to know about the life of the people he killed.
And not condoning his actions. That offering
Exactly.
compassion to him isn't condoning his actions.
Yeah, so AI was very strong on that part of it, but it also suggested a separate altar. Not to denigrate.
Right.
So that was interesting. Okay.
But this is a Sangha learning moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good to be with you.
Okay. Take
Thanks,
care,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
I feel tempted to say, what would Mila McCarthy do?
Oh, I think he'd do it.
And there you go.
Yeah, yeah.